Okay, I would like to welcome everybody here to tonight's call. This is Wednesday, January 25th, and we'll just take a few minutes here and give everybody a little more time. Maybe we'll see if anybody logs out, somebody else logs in. Basically, they have to. If this is your first time utilizing freeconferencecall.com, then you have to download the app and all that stuff and be able to log in to do that. So we'll just give it another few seconds here. But I just wanted to let everybody know that kind of the reason for the idea for this call really came out of several weeks ago, actually back in about mid-December or right after Carrie Fisher passed away, and then her mother passed away the next day, Debbie Reynolds. I was contacted by the BBC out of London and BBC Radio, News Radio, that they were doing a piece on the effects of severe grief, trauma, and from an event such as, like a parent or a daughter, and how they were saying that she died of a broken heart. And so over the time, I've kind of thought about this, and I've been asked for the last 20 plus years, how long does the grief last, or they refer to it as they like to use the word it. How long does it last, or does it ever end? And no, it doesn't ever end. And how long it lasts, I think it depends. I think it lasts, for most people, if not everybody, it lasts for the rest of your life. So that brought me to the question that we're asking here in tonight's call is why, grief, why does it hurt so many years later? And so we're going to dive into that question a little bit. So, again, I'd like to welcome everybody here to tonight's call. And, with our topic tonight, and the question is, why does grief hurt so much even when it has been years later? And if you're in a situation where you haven't been through your grief for the last over 12 months, then anniversary dates of the death and things like that, you may still be working through your grief, going through the stages of grief as far as, and you haven't necessarily moved to acceptance. So that is something that hopefully you have a grief group, a grief counselor, somebody that you're working with in that line that will move you to that point of acceptance. I'll kind of touch on that here in a little bit. And, this is a call that I wish to do every Wednesday, and we will record these and put this up on our webpage and our Facebook page for those that can't attend so they can hear. This is something to get some information from. Hopefully, as I'll give you my answer to that question. There's probably hundreds of answers to that question as far as the grief itself. A lot of people will probably say why grief hurts, and they have a lot of different reasons why. So we'll kind of touch on that here as we go. But this is just totally my experiences, totally what it is that I feel that I have learned through my lessons, and I will kind of give you the take on that as we go, as we kind of dive into this question a little bit. If you've got a question, you can, if you're online, you can type it into the chat box. But if you don't have a question right now, that's fine. Also, when we get to our Q&A time, if you're calling in by phone, you will be able to utilize the phone, and I'll give you instructions on how you can unmute yourself and be able to ask your question live on the phone. And so that way we can have a little bit of conversation. And so hopefully that'll work out real well for us. So let's take a look at who I am and why do I have the right to talk about this topic. What exactly is my story? Okay. Well, first of all, my name is Rick Kaufman, and I host a website, Facebook page. It's called A Father's Loss. I've written a few books, nothing stellar by no means. Amazon bestsellers at best. That's about it. But, my story really starts back when I was 14 years old. And, when I was 14 years old, my father was a business person, and I wanted my father to be proud of me. And I did everything in my power to, have my father look at me and turn around and say that he was proud. The other thing is my sister was an excellent student, had goals and dreams to go to college and be successful. That wasn't necessarily the path that I was really looking at taking. I was looking at taking a little more, just straight kind of bypassing the college thing and just going into business. I had a dream to be in business for myself with my wife and my family, to be available for my children as in business. That was something that I really was looking forward to later in life. I developed my work ethic, though, when I was in high school with my high school soccer coach. My high school soccer coach really taught me how to be a winner. He really taught me how to work hard for what it is that you want. In other words, be the first one to show up, the last one to leave. Do these things and really put all your heart and soul in your work. This is kind of carried through in my life. And that's one of the things that I really feel is very, as I get into my story here in just a few minutes, that I feel has made me who I am today. But as time goes on, time in the military, I was married, I had 2 children, and came home back to Ohio, and I had a business with 2 store locations and a few employees, and it was a very successful business. And about 4 years into that business, I remember sitting in my office, or actually I was getting ready to walk out the door, and as I was approaching the door after leaving my office, the phone rings, and my employee tells me to come back and get the phone. And so I go and answer the phone, and it's somebody asking me to go to the hospital, that they found my 3-year-old daughter face down in our local pool. And that was a really tough thing to hear. I could hear sirens on the phone. I could hear sirens in the background. And they said that the lifeguards and people there were doing CPR on her, but I should get my car and go straight to the hospital. I just dropped the phone, took off, ran out, and jumped in my car with my flashers, passing people. I could hear the sirens. I had the windows open, and as it was in June, the summertime, and I could hear the sirens coming towards the hospital. I beat the ambulance to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, maybe a matter of a minute or so later, they carried my daughter's, they were running, the paramedics were running in the hospital with my daughter's lifeless body. The nurse came in, and she proceeded to, ask me where my wife was at. And I didn't really know. As a husband, we have a tendency to let things go in one ear and out the other ear. You see, my wife she was going to school to become a nurse, and she was meeting some friends that were in class with her for a luncheon meeting to go over notes and exchange books and notes and things like that. She told me where she was going, but at that particular moment, I couldn't really remember. I said, I believe that she was at someplace in Springfield, and wasn't quite sure. I says, I think Bob Evans. They said, which one? There's 2 of them. I says, it'd be the one on the north end of town by the mall. I says, that's because that would be the closest to our home. So, and lo and behold, that's where she was. She got to the hospital, went into the emergency room, and she immediately went back to see and talk with our daughter. Of course, she was unresponsive, but they were still working on her. They asked me if I wanted to go, and I said no. The nurse that I was talking with really wasn't much help. She was talking to me and telling me she didn't understand how, she's a mother, but never had lived through anything like this, and she wasn't making anything better really for me. But anyways, to kind of fast forward a little bit, so they care flighted her to Children's in Columbus. We had our pastor from our church drive us to Columbus. We got lost. of all days to get lost, we got lost trying to go. He said that he believed that the hospital was on the south side of town. Well, if you're familiar with Columbus, Ohio, it's downtown. But anyways, we let him drive. He said he's been there, so we let him drive. We got to the south side of Columbus and no hospital. We then stopped at a BP gas station, asked them where the hospital was. Eventually we got to the hospital. When we checked in, they told us to sit down and wait a minute when they were on the phones. And then they told us to go to that elevator and go up to, I think, the second or third floor. And once we did that, it was really odd. Nobody really seemed to be in a hurry to get us anyplace. And when we came off the elevator, there was a preacher there, or minister, and with his robe on. And immediately we looked across over my right shoulder, and I could see a nice wooden rocking chair, ones you might see in hospitals or maternity ward. That wasn't a good sign, and we expected the worst, and actually it was the worst. They came out and told us that our daughter didn't make it. I believe today that the reason why we got lost is because if we would have arrived at the hospital, we would have arrived at a very inappropriate time because they were working on her and it wasn't looking good. And so by the time we got there, and they told us this, she was all cleaned up, ready for us to see her. We went in to see her. I was asked if I wanted to hold her and rock her. I said no. I didn't want to hold her or rock her, and that was something that, that it haunts me today because I really wish I would have done that. But I felt at that particular point in time, I felt that she couldn't hold me back or hug me back, so what good would it have been? So I turned around and I turn around and I lost my train of thought here. So, let me get my train of thought here back. Got a note here, so I just wanted to take a look at it real quick. But, I felt that things happen for a reason. So, kind of fast forward a little bit, and, we went home and went through the funeral, went through all that process, and we turned around and we then went right to, my job. The next morning, somebody came in and said, "Who's all the flowers for?" and who died, and had to explain to him my daughter died. And, we did all the grief counseling, grief groups. The one thing that one person said to me through that process is, and again, I don't know what your faith is, and I don't know, what you feel like, but they turned around and said one thing to me that really kind of helped me out. And they said, if God was to come to you and tell you he was going to give you a daughter, and when that daughter was 3 years old, 2 weeks before her 4th birthday, he was going to call her home, would you still want her? My answer to that question, at that time was like, I don't know. I don't know if I would want her. I then turned around and came back and said, emphatic yes. Oh yes. If I knew no matter how much time I was going to have my daughter, I would take her. If there was an expiration date, I would take her and make the best out of our life together. But, we're not given that information. And, so I bury myself in my work only to have about, several years later to have my wife come home and tell me she doesn't love me anymore. She wants a divorce. Grief is a very powerful emotion. It can destroy not only relationships, but it can destroy your emotion, your thinking, how the choices and the decisions that you make. And my life was really beginning to spiral out of control. And that really threw me back into the grief. I learned that grieving was nothing. Grieving a divorce was nothing more than a death of a marriage. So I was grieving the loss of my daughter, now the loss of my wife, in that manner. And I felt as a failure as a father because I wasn't there to protect my daughter that day, and to see to it that she's still here. And I failed her, and now I felt that I failed my wife as my marriage was failing. I then turned around and hated my life. I hated my business. Everything I did in my business, I did to build up for our family and for everything that we were doing. One of the things is I turned around and I really just buried myself in my work, hoping things would work out. We went through marriage counseling, divorce counseling, and that's where I began to learn a few things. But it didn't really, process right in my head at the time. But eventually my marriage ended, and I turned to suicide, not just once but twice. The second time I was sitting in my office with a handgun sitting on my desk, and I really was contemplating on taking my life. And then I realized there was no bullets. That actually scared me to the point where I reached out, and I asked for help. I then eventually sold my business, and I reinvented myself. And I went chasing. I really started searching for, the Holy Grail or whatever it is that you were searching for. And to be honest, what I know now, I was searching for the life that I had before my daughter died. I believed that I could have what I had before she died. And obviously, if you're grieving and you've walked in my shoes, you obviously know that is impossible. You cannot have the life that you had before. You cannot have that. So it's gone. When your loved one passed away, that part of your life is gone. Nothing will ever be the same. And so, so I bounced around. I was in a couple other businesses, several jobs, and then, I reinvented myself and, several times. And, from aircraft mechanic to business person to, back, into sales and as a banker, an investment banker, back into business, and then back into, in maintenance and mechanics. And, then eventually I turned around and was remarried and had a business at that time, and we were, doing rather well. And then my wife had a tragic accident, and I had to perform CPR and almost lost her back about 5 years ago. And so that really, started that whole roller coaster of things all over again. And so I went and reinvented myself again, and I became a truck driver, driving semi-trucks. And I thought this is something I could do, get me out of my house, get me someplace else, but at the same time be able to provide for my family. But all along, something was pulling at me, and I felt like there was more to life. There was something I should be doing. I just didn't know what it was. And then I got a phone call from that my father had cancer and had less than a year to live. And I had to have a conversation with my father, because in the beginning of the story I mentioned to you that I wanted to make my father proud. I really felt as a failure in that department. So I turned around and I had a conversation with my dad before he passed away. And one of the things that he told me, he said, son, he was always proud of me. He realized I was different than my sister. He supported me in my entrepreneurship and things that I wanted to do. And he looked at me, he says, one thing I've known about you, he says, you have impeccable work ethic. You can do anything that you want to do. He says, when you graduated high school, I told you your education was just beginning and that life was going to teach you a lot of lessons. Of course, when you're 18, 19 years old, you don't know what those lessons are. And of course, you don't want to believe that your education is just starting. You feel like, you've got the whole world, by its coattails. And so, and he says, you have life lessons that you've learned. You have a mission. You have a calling. What that calling is and what you're to be doing, he says, I don't know. He says, you will figure that out in time. And and that kind of stuck with me, but I really didn't quite understand what he was saying. And one day when I was driving my truck, I felt a very strong presence, and I was being pushed to do some writing, to tell my story, to work with other grieving parents. And this was about 2.5, 3 years ago. And so I really felt this calling to go into kind of a service-based work where I start serving other people, working with other people. What I did from that point is I then began studying and learning everything there was about writing and publishing, and because I really had a dream to write a book. And to this day, I haven't actually wrote that book. I've written several parts of that book, but never have actually completed that book. But but that was just one part of it. But I really needed to learn how to, get out in public and speak, and how to, or find my mission and find my calling and find, the lessons I've learned. And I found my coach and mentor. And my coach and mentor, he taught me something. And this is a person that never doesn't really know a whole lot about grief or about loss. Not to say he hasn't experienced it, but that wasn't what he was teaching me. He was really teaching me more about developing my story, the story I'm telling you now, and to begin to peel back the layers of that story. And then, as you peel back these layers of the story, you begin to learn things about you. You begin to learn lessons that you've learned through this process that I can begin to teach other people, that I can begin to help others learn, through their personal story. There's a question that was asked, where have you been, where are you now, and where are you going? Before my daughter passed away, I had answers to those questions. After she passed away, I could tell you where I've been, could tell you where I am now. I had no clue where I was going. And so that's the way I lived my life over the last 20 plus years. And and I begin to have this inner breakthrough and this outer breakthrough. And the inner breakthrough is really understanding what my mission is and my calling. And it's really not to work with people say in the beginning stages of their grief. I am not a grief counselor. I'm not a therapist. I call myself, I am a grief transitional transitional empowerment coach. Counselors and therapists focus on the past and the present day. Yeah, we will talk about the past, we'll talk about the present, but we're going to focus on the future. And because I believe that out of tragedy comes your greatest triumphs and your greatest victories. And there's a quote by Norman Cousins, and that's exactly what he says. The greatest tragedy is not death. It is what dies inside of us while we live. And that is a great quote, because that's exactly the way I was living my life. I was dead on the inside. I was dead on the inside and had no focus and no mission, no idea what I was to be doing. And so my mentor, he brought this out, and I developed this program, Disempowered to Empowering Millions. And one of the things is being disempowered. The tragic events in life are things that cause us to become disempowered. And we lose our focus. We get lost in the fog. If you've seen my video about Lost in the Fog, that's one of the things that I talk about. So, and then, I begin to get credibility as I talk with people and I work with people, and I have, and I have this connection, and then I get the phone call to speak with the BBC, and that's, is a credibility thing that obviously, what makes me qualified to talk of this topic. If the BBC, which is a huge worldwide news network, contacts me, and they feel that I'm qualified to go on their radio, to be interviewed on their radio, to discuss the topic of Debbie Reynolds passing away the day after her daughter died of a broken heart, then I believe that I probably am qualified to speak about this topic of why does grief hurt later in life. And so, my daughter Kelsey, if there's a picture of my daughter Kelsey, she was born July 3rd, 1989, and she passed away June 15th of 1993. She was just 3 years old, and 2 weeks before her fourth birthday, she was in the care of our babysitter the day of the accident. I dropped her off at the pool, and the last thing I saw was her turning around, waving at me, smiling at me. That's one of the last things I remember, seeing her alive. One of the things I kind of want to cover here was a little bit of housekeeping with you. What we're going to do, like I indicated in the beginning, is make sure you have some pencil and paper and take notes as I kind of go rather quickly through this process here. But at the same time, you can contact me at any time. Shoot through either my website or Facebook or my emails through. If you receive emails from me, you can contact me if you have any questions. But I want you to get the most out of any information I have. Like I said, this is just my interpretation. These are my thoughts, what I've learned, and I think it will help us. It has definitely helped me understand and deal with these issues if I understand why it hurts, and so I don't have to question those things. And so, and if you have questions, again, just put them in the chat box if you want, if you're online. If you're on the phone, just hold your questions, and we'll get to questions, and then I will give you instructions on how to unmute yourself if you want to go live and you have a story you want to share, or you want to be able to tell somebody a little bit of something about yourself or what you're going through, and we can discuss that if you want to. It is definitely something you do not have to do. But let's go to this question: grief. Why does it hurt years later? This is kind of a picture of a blue heart, really, but you can see the scars, okay? And that's what I really feel the reason why it probably hurts. Just here a couple weeks ago, I had shoulder surgery on my right shoulder with my rotator cuff. I've had left shoulder surgery, and I've had my left knee. So I've got a few scars. That got me thinking on this topic that, the scars that we carry on our body, these are physical scars. These scars, when we look at those scars and we see those, we can remember exactly the reason why we have those scars. We can remember all the circumstances involving those scars. Everything about that physical injury, we can pretty much tell you just like it was yesterday. Well, grief is an emotion, but grief will really leave emotional scars as you go through the healing process. So these scars are on the inside, okay? And, one of the things that I believe is when we go through grief counseling, okay, grief counseling is going to basically, put a Band-Aid on it, okay? Grief is a very powerful emotion. Our counselor, and they do a great job. Don't get me wrong. You must. I believe that everybody should go through counseling. Everybody should get help early on, because the sooner you get help, the better off you are. But typically they put a Band-Aid and they begin to heal, and then you do all the work on your own, and you get to the point of acceptance. And after that, you feel you do not need these people anymore, and you go on about your life. Then things happen. The Band-Aid comes off. You have the anniversary, you have the birthday, you have special events, you have certain triggers, clothing, smells, colors, whatever you have that might trigger that pain. Years later down the road, somebody will say something. It'll be a TV show. It'll be something that you'll see, and it will trigger that pain and take you back to that eventful day in your life, just like it was yesterday, and you will relive all that painful emotion all over again. It will happen. It does happen, okay? Not to necessarily to everybody to some extent, but, if you are really consumed with the grief, and these emotional scars can be so bad, and the healing process could be so really tough and hard to heal, because a lot of people don't start the healing process until much later, because there's so many other things that they have to deal with. Legal issues, funeral, family issues, all kinds of things that don't allow you the opportunity to spend the time for yourself to grieve. So we wind up putting a Band-Aid on it, and we hide behind that Band-Aid. What I like to say, it's like ripping and tearing. Just like you would be tearing an envelope open. If you have a sealed envelope, just imagine this. If you have a sealed envelope and you stick your finger in and you tear that envelope along the sealed side, how's it open up? It gets torn apart. Okay, it's ripped open, jagged edges, everything. If you wanted to close that envelope up, it's very, it's not going to close, because you got pieces going all over the place. But if you took a pair of scissors or a letter opener and sliced it open, then guess what? You are able to it's going to basically, you can tape it up and seal it up, and it's almost look as good as new. And then, of course, you have the unsealed envelope, which opens and closes and everything's fine. Well, that's just like the surgeon. If a surgeon does a really nasty job in stitching you up and getting you prepared, then you're going to have a much more pronounced scar, and the scarring is going to be much greater. Just take a look at somebody who has open heart surgery, the scar that they carry, and versus somebody like my shoulder scar is not as pronounced and as serious. So it seems like the worst of things leave much bigger scars. That's the same with the grief. When that grief is so hard, it really is going to leave that emotional scarring. So I like to just say it's like ripping and tearing. When it tears, things tear apart. The other way that I like to explain it is this. We are connected just as our hands are intertwined. This is the part that I learned through my divorce. One of the things that when I went through my counseling with my divorce, he said the reason why the divorce hurts so much is, he says, when you stood up on the altar, when you took your vows, you were told to, you'll be joined as one, okay? And so when that person leaves your life, okay, and you want to hold the marriage together, but that person leaves your life, guess what? That's like when you pull those fingers apart, that's like your soul is being torn apart. So that's that emotional scarring. And then that person is out. Well, when somebody like my daughter, or, if somebody's died and passed away, and you expected them to be home tonight in your house and they don't come home, they've been ripped away from you, okay? And that is a very traumatic experience on the inside, on your heart, your emotions, and things like that. Case in point, Debbie Reynolds. When her daughter, Carrie Fisher, she was ripped away from her unexpectedly. And the emotion of that was so traumatic, so painful. When she said she wanted to be with her, it's exactly what she did. She was ready to go, and she did. She died of a broken heart, as they say, even though it was a stroke. But still, call it what you want. But that's what I believe. That's why it's so painful, is because that person was ripped away from us. My father passed away of cancer. Yes, I grieved his loss, but he lived into his 80s. He lived a full life. Do I miss him? Yes. Do I grieve his loss? Yes. My mother grieves too, and and everybody else in our family. But it was expected. It was something. So he wasn't necessarily ripped away from us. Okay. Do we want him to have another day? Yes, of course we do. But it's different when it's a child, your spouse. I believe those are some of the two worst, grieving situations that can happen. When your parents pass away early on, that can also be just as tough, because again, that's unexpected. When it's an unexpected death, I believe is when it becomes the toughest and the hardest on us. And here's what I want to ask you to do. Okay, let me, this is something I started doing after I had that conversation with the BBC. And I spent some time meditating in the morning. And what I was is I said to myself, to my daughters, maybe we should have a talk. Okay, and let me ask you that question: have you ever had that talk with your loved ones? Have you asked questions? Okay, and what I'm saying here is have you had that discussion with them to ask them this one simple question? I asked my daughter, not my 3-year-old daughter. She would be 27 years old today. I asked my 27-year-old daughter if she was happy and proud of the way my life turned out since she has gone. And I kept asking that question. I meditated and kept asking that question. And eventually I got an answer, and this is what my daughter told me. She told me she was not proud. She was upset that we got divorced. She was upset that, I turned to suicide. She was upset that I sold the business. In other words, and the biggest thing is she was upset because I blamed everything on her death. And but she says, Dad, you want to do something. What you're doing right now is you want to go out and bring awareness to pool safety and drowning and these type of things. And she said to me, you can't save people. You can only give them the information. And she says, who are the ones listening to you? When you're talking about pool safety and these things, who are the ones that are listening to you? And my answer to that is real simple. People that have experienced what I experienced, you know, and I'm helping them through a tough time. Not real, you know, and really what I was doing, I was there for them. I was there for them when they needed somebody to be there. But other than that, I really wasn't really getting my message out and saving people's lives. In the beginning, we did, you know, scholarship funds and education, CPR trainings, and pool safety programs, and we did a lot of things in the community. But when my marriage ended, so did all those things. And so, you know, she says, you know, what you need to do, Dad, is tell your story. And she says, and then work with other people and help them develop a cause. And then through helping them with their cause and sharing their story, they will also share your story, and we can impact more people's lives. We can begin to impact more people's lives to make things better. All along the way, you know, maybe making, you know, giving your grief something to live for. You know, something that I feel is out of our greatest tragedy and triumphs comes our greatest victories, okay? And what I mean by that is by just looking at things that way, you know, out of my loss, you know, comes, you know, service, which makes things easier to deal with. You know, looking and devoting myself to helping other people. In other words, devoting myself and coming up with a way to help people develop their cause, find their story. And so that was what my daughter was telling me I needed to do. I needed to get out there and, you know, approach things in that way. Not so much, you know, focusing on the past, you know, about my experience, because realistically, she says, Dad, nobody really cares. Yes, your story is an emotional story, but nobody really cares about that. What they want to know is, how did you get the results? How can you, you know, in other words, when somebody says to me, I am sorry for your loss, you know, my response is, well, I thank them and I appreciate their concerns, but, you know, out of my, you know, biggest tragedies comes my, you know, greatest triumphs and my greatest victories. And that, you know, can start the conversation. You know, so let me ask you a question. What's your story and what are your life lessons? You've actually got a blank book there, you know, so maybe you can sit down and begin to write out what your stories are, you know, and what are your life lessons. In other words, if somebody can ask you how you made it through that first night, how you made it through that first week, how you made it through that first year, the first birthday, the first Christmas, the first anniversary, you know, keep a journal. Keep a journal as you go through and begin to find out what your life lessons are. What are the things that you learned? And then you can begin to put that together. And then you can also find your cause. You can find your mission, okay, to be able to help others in that process. And so, you know, what is your cause and mission? You know, how can you make a difference while improving your life? Okay, and what I mean by that is, you know, advice. You've got advice, okay? You've got information that can help people. You know, most of the people that I may talk to are just one or two steps behind me. That's it. I talk with my mentors, my coaches, people that I look up that are ahead of me in the process, and I learn from them. And so we're just sharing information. Just like I said it before, you know, my soccer coach says, hey, you know, if I teach you one thing, that you go on and then teach somebody. And I was a high school soccer coach, a youth coach, and I've coached my son and my other children. And, you know, if I teach them and then they go on and teach somebody, what I'm actually teaching them is what my coach taught me, okay, and I applied in the game, in the sport, and then I've taught the people the same principles and the same things and the same work ethic, and then they go on and then they can begin to teach. Now, my coach may be dead and gone, but his legacy, part of him lives on through me or through the other people, and that's what I'm getting at, is you have advice, you have life lessons. You know, what I can teach somebody, they can also pass that on to other people. And so in turn, you know, we can create a mission. And this is what I call empowering millions with just one person at a time. You know, on this chart or this graph, that's me at the top, empowering millions. okay? I'm just one person. I'm not going to speak to millions of people, okay? Even though, my goal is to get on stage and do things and really speak to, hundreds of thousands of people. So, yeah, I may essentially speak to millions of people, but how many people really listen? But on this little chart, just this little flow chart really just says, if I help two, between those two people, they help three. Altogether, I've helped 5 people. Okay, 2 directly, 3 people indirectly, and I've helped them create a cause, create a mission through what they've learned through their life lessons, what they've learned through the things that they're doing. And totally different than maybe mine. Their stories are totally different. It could be, everything, whatever's an emotional, tragic loss for somebody. I'm not going to sit here and say one person's grief and one person's loss is any less significant than the other person. Everything from emotional trauma to abuse to all kinds of things that people can come out with their story and find out that they really have a calling for something. And, and so I help them discover what that calling is, what that is, and be able to put that in a program. And I believe in having a mission. In other words, where have you been? Where are you now? Where are you going? Well, I'm going to go empower millions of people. You can either join me in this process or you can be part of the process, but it's the part of it is you can be part of the process all along improving your situation and also improving your story, because out of service comes a feeling of, you're doing something good. And that's exactly what my daughter was telling me. She says, you can affect more people by doing something like this than focusing on that day, what went wrong that day. We know what went wrong. The babysitter didn't do her job, lifeguards didn't do their job, there were certain factors at the pool weren't in place, number of things. I'm not, we've made changes for the better, but in the end, if people don't listen, I can't save lives. But we can effectively improve the people that are hurting the most. We can improve their quality of life. We can save relationships. We can save lives. We can partner and get your cause, your information out to more people through our community and vice versa. So we can approach and be able to speak to so many more people. And so, I'm going to challenge you to join our Facebook group if you haven't done so already at A Father's Loss. So just go to, facebook.com, type in A Father's Loss. You'll see my picture of my daughter and click the like page so that way you can be, caught up with what's going on. And also, there's over 4,000 people, roughly 4,300 people that are there. You can post comments, comment on their post, my post, and be able to give feedback to others. And let's connect on our website also at afathersloss.com. Go there, and so you can pick up posts, things like that. Eventually, my plan is here very soon is to put together a membership site, and so part of that membership site is I want to invite people to be part of a beta program on that membership site where we can begin to really get elaborate on our community, but at the same time really come up with some good trainings and things that can really benefit people, and have some great resources and books and things like that what others are doing that has helped them. We can begin to share those. And also make sure to join us next Wednesday, same time, as they used to say as a kid, same bat channel, same bat time. So, next Wednesday at 8 p.m. If 8 p.m.s work great, we will keep it at 8 p.m. If we need to change the times, we'll change the times to maybe facilitate a little bit better. But at the same time, my goal is to put the recordings of this up. Whether or not there's anybody that shows up on the call or not, I will still do the call in case somebody shows up halfway through the call, but at the same time, I'll record that so we can get that information out to you. And so, so with that being said, I'd like to open it up if there's anybody that would like to share, if they have a comment or anything that they would like to say, or if they have a question, we'll kind of pose those questions. And I understand that a lot of people don't wish to share. We've only got a few people on the call here tonight anyways, but I understand if you don't want to share, or you can just type in the chat box, or you can, if you're on the phone, you can just, I think it is *6, I believe it is. Just hit *6, and you can break out of the chat and be able to be live with me on the call. And if you're on the phone, if you're online, just I believe you can just click on the microphone and unmute yourself, or I can unmute everybody here. And so that way, if you have something you would like to share, then we can share something. So with that being said, but yeah, I'll just kind of begin to wrap this up here a little bit and kind of let you know that we're going to do this every Wednesday. We'll probably still stay with this topic of why grief hurts, because there's several things that we can always discuss about this. But with that being said, I want to thank everybody for the opportunity for me to be able to speak to you here tonight, and also for those of you that do follow me on Facebook and on my website. I want to thank you for that. I do appreciate your comments. I do appreciate your feedback. I do appreciate everything that you contribute to our group. And that, one of the things with, especially grieving parents is, or anybody that's grieving a loss, is that lonely feeling. There's people of all walks, of all situations, and that are part of this group. And I know that each and every one of them would be more than happy to, be able to, share their information. But, well, thank you. Lori here just said that, she feels for me and my loss, and she thanks me for sharing the story with us. And, that's just, one of the things that, I think has helped me the most is being able to talk about it. That kind of goes back to, a couple of decades ago. But, it's one of those things where, I think when my marriage ended, we grieved very differently. I spoke about it. I was moving forward and talking, and she wasn't. I think that's very important, that you've got to be able to talk, and you got to be able to share, but when you're ready to do so. And some people are never ready, and they don't want to discuss it because, again, it goes back to those emotional scars, the pain. That's why a lot of times for a lot of people, it will continue causing you pain. It will continue hurting years later. But you've got to learn. You've got to learn to deal with those demons. You've got to learn to deal with those things. And I believe one of the best ways to learn to deal with those is to find your calling, to find your mission, develop a cause that is very important to you. And maybe it might even be important to your loved one. But get out into your community and start telling your story, and start moving and focus on the future, and put a cause, a mission together. My mission is to empower millions. If you want, tag on to my mission and be part of my group to empower millions. If not, create your own group and do your thing, but have a mission and do something. So with that being said, if there's no other questions or no other comments here, I just want to, thank everybody for being here tonight. And I look forward to speaking with some of you later on. And so with that, it's about almost 9 o'clock, so we've been on here for about 55 minutes. Look for the recording. I will put this recording up. So with that being said, thank you, everybody. I appreciate each and every one of you, and totally grateful to get to know you, and more than you'll ever know. So you guys are all awesome. Have a blessed night, and hopefully you can make it back here next Wednesday when we continue our discussion of grief. Why does it hurt so many years later? So for now, peace out. We will talk to you all later.